There is something important coming through from someone who has been on your mind, and before you listen any further, take a quiet moment to settle yourself. What is being revealed here comes from a place of separation, silence, and emotions that have remained hidden for far too long. This message is arriving now for a reason. Something within this connection has changed, and when feelings that have been suppressed for a long time finally begin to rise, time starts to feel very different. Welcome to Jungian Love. If you enjoy these messages, be sure to subscribe, activate notifications, and stay connected. Every message shared here is designed to help you see relationships, emotions, and human behavior from a deeper perspective. The person connected to you has been carrying emotions they rarely allow themselves to acknowledge. This has not appeared overnight. It has been developing quietly beneath the surface for a long time. Even during periods when they acted unaffected or behaved as though nothing had changed between the two of you, they never truly erased you from their heart or mind. They did not simply stop caring. What actually happened is far more complicated. They pushed their feelings down because they did not know how to process them. Instead of expressing what was happening inside, they chose to hide it. But emotions that are hidden do not disappear. They remain beneath the surface, gathering weight and intensity as time passes. What is coming forward now is not calm, confidence, or certainty. It comes from inner tension, emotional discomfort, and unresolved feelings. Your person is struggling with a sense of unease they can no longer ignore. Something has recently awakened these emotions. It may have been a familiar place, an unexpected memory, a name they heard, or simply a quiet moment when distractions stopped working. Whatever caused it, the effect was powerful. Thoughts of you returned strongly and refused to fade away. This time was different. Instead of passing through their mind briefly, your presence remained. It followed them into quiet moments, especially during the late hours when life slows down and there is nothing left to distract them from what they truly feel. During those moments, a realization began to grow. They started to confront the possibility that they could lose you completely. Not temporarily, not for a short period of time, but in a way that might never be repaired. That realization did not arrive gently. It surfaced again and again in different situations. It appeared when they checked their phone and felt an unexpected emptiness. It appeared when they tried to enjoy everyday life but felt emotionally disconnected from everything around them. It appeared when silence became impossible to ignore. They are beginning to understand something they spent a long time avoiding. No one affects them the way you do. No one creates the same emotional comfort. No one carries the same energy. No one makes them feel understood in quite the same way. What once felt ordinary to them now feels rare. And instead of bringing comfort, that realization hurts. The urgency growing inside them is not only connected to love, it is connected to fear. The fear of losing something valuable that they failed to fully appreciate while it was still available to them. If they could lower their defenses and speak with complete honesty, they would admit they wish they had handled things differently. They would admit they assumed there would always be another opportunity, another conversation, another chance. Part of them believed your presence would remain constant regardless of how inconsistent they were. Now they understand that distance does not appear overnight. It grows gradually. Silence creates space, and enough space eventually begins to feel permanent. They are also facing another uncomfortable truth. Choosing not to act was still a choice. Remaining silent was still a decision, and every decision creates consequences. Without realizing it, their avoidance slowly changed the emotional connection between you. Now they regret the moments they failed to show up when it mattered most. They regret withholding communication when honesty was needed. They regret choosing distance instead of vulnerability. At the time, silence felt easier. It felt safer. It felt like a way to protect themselves. But avoidance always carries a price, even if that price is delayed. Your person struggles deeply with emotional expression. It is not because they lack feelings. In many ways, the opposite is true. They often feel too much at once. Their emotions become overwhelming, difficult to organize, and difficult to communicate. Being emotionally open feels dangerous to them. It feels like giving up control. It feels like exposing parts of themselves they do not know how to protect. Because of that, they withdraw. Instead of speaking, they wait. Instead of expressing, they postpone. Instead of confronting difficult emotions, they try to outlast them. Yet emotions do not disappear simply because they are ignored. They collect, they build, they remain, and eventually they demand attention. Whether they realize it consciously or not, they are now experiencing an important psychological truth. Anything left unresolved inside eventually reveals itself through life circumstances, repeating patterns, missed opportunities, and painful losses. They are finally feeling the consequences of what was left unspoken. One of the hardest realities for them is recognizing that you are no longer standing in the same emotional place. They can feel the difference. Your energy has changed. Your responses carry a different tone. Even your silence feels different now. It carries a weight that affects them more than arguments ever could. You may still care. You may still hold compassion. But you are no longer waiting with the same expectation. You are no longer chasing answers. You are no longer living in uncertainty while hoping clarity will arrive. You are no longer offering endless emotional availability without receiving effort in return. That shift has not gone unnoticed. In fact, it affects them more deeply than they expected. They became accustomed to your patience. They became accustomed to your understanding. They became accustomed to knowing you would be emotionally present, even during times when they were not giving the same energy back. Now, that pattern has changed, and they feel the absence of it. What they fear losing is not simply you as a person. They fear losing the emotional safety they experienced around you, the acceptance, the understanding, the feeling of being seen without feeling criticized. They are beginning to realize that some connections cannot simply be replaced. Some emotional bonds are unique. Some people leave an imprint that cannot be recreated elsewhere. That realization is bringing both regret and fear to the surface. They find themselves asking difficult questions when nobody else is around. Did they damage something truly meaningful? Did they take your presence for granted? Did they wait too long before making an effort? These thoughts continue repeating in quiet moments, especially when they compare their current experiences to what they once shared with you. And no matter how hard they try, nothing feels quite the same. That is where the urgency is coming from. Not because their feelings suddenly appeared, but because they are finally aware that time may not be unlimited. They sense that if they continue doing nothing, the emotional doorway between you could close completely. Not through a dramatic ending, not through conflict, but through a quiet shift where your attachment simply fades away. For them, that possibility is difficult to accept. Part of them wants to reach out. Part of them wants to explain everything. Part of them wants to offer a genuine apology without excuses or justifications, yet fear continues holding them back. Fear of rejection, fear of hearing no response, fear that they have waited too long, fear that your heart no longer feels what it once did. Because of that fear, they hesitate. They start writing messages and erase them. They imagine conversations repeatedly, but never initiate them. They rehearse what they would say if given the chance, yet the words remain trapped inside. And while they continue delaying, the emotional pressure they carry only grows heavier with time. What is happening here should not be mistaken for a promise that everything will suddenly change. It is not a guarantee that this person will transform overnight or immediately become different. What is happening is something more subtle. It is awareness. It is the moment when someone finally recognizes the value of something after realizing what its absence feels like. The most important part of this message is not only what they are experiencing, it is also what has happened within you. You are not standing in the same emotional place where you once stood. You are no longer trapped inside the same uncertainty. You are no longer waiting endlessly for answers that never came. Little by little, whether you noticed it or not, you have started moving forward internally. The progress may have been slow, but it has been real. That is why everything feels different now. While you have been moving toward greater understanding, they have been looking backward. The memories they once overlooked are returning to them, but they see them differently now. They are no longer viewing those moments through pride, comfort, or assumption. They are viewing them through the lens of potential loss. They remember the effort you invested, They remember the patience you offered. They remember the times you extended understanding even when the same level of care was not being returned. Those memories carry a different emotional weight now. What once seemed ordinary suddenly feels significant. They are also confronting a truth they avoided for a long time. You were never asking for perfection. You were never demanding impossible standards. What you wanted was presence, consistency, honesty, a willingness to meet you halfway emotionally. And that is exactly where they fell short. Again and again, they chose the comfort of avoidance over the discomfort of growth. They postponed difficult conversations instead of having them. They delayed honesty because it felt easier in the moment. Now they are living with the results of those decisions. Meanwhile, you have changed. You see things more clearly now. You understand yourself more deeply. You are no longer being shaped by confusion the way you once were. That inner shift has created a distance between you that cannot be ignored. As a result, your person finds themselves standing at an emotional crossroads. One path feels familiar and safe because it allows them to avoid vulnerability. It lets them remain protected behind old patterns and emotional defenses. The other path asks something very different of them. It requires accountability. It requires honesty. It requires emotional exposure. Most importantly, it requires them to confront the parts of themselves they have spent years avoiding. Ironically, that difficult path is also the only one that offers a possibility of repairing what has been damaged. The problem is that taking that step is far harder than simply recognizing it, because facing you would also mean facing themselves, and that is where their greatest struggle exists. They are beginning to realize that loss usually announces itself before it becomes permanent. First, it appears as a feeling. Then it becomes awareness. Eventually, it becomes reality. Right now, they are somewhere between awareness and fear. They can feel you changing. They can sense you moving forward emotionally, not because you are angry, not because you are trying to punish them, but because you have gained clarity, and clarity is often more powerful than emotion. Strong emotions can shift quickly. Clarity tends to remain. That is what unsettles them. They are not only afraid of losing you, they are afraid of what that loss would reveal about their own choices. It would force them to admit that they waited too long, that they remained silent when they should have spoken, that they assumed your presence would always be there without realizing it required effort and care. Whether they are prepared for that truth or not, they are standing in front of it now. There is another message connected to this situation, and it carries a similar energy. Before you continue, allow yourself to become still for a moment. What is coming through is not dramatic or loud. It comes from quiet spaces, from distance, from words that were never spoken when they should have been. Its weight comes from everything that remained unsaid. This message is not trying to tell you how to feel. It is not attempting to influence your choices. It is simply describing a shift that has already taken place beneath the surface of this connection. Your person has been carrying emotional burdens for much longer than they admit. Not for days, not for weeks, but through countless moments that seemed insignificant at the time. Moments where honesty could have happened. Moments where clarity was available. Moments where they could have stepped forward emotionally. Instead, they chose silence. At the time, those decisions felt small. Now they no longer feel small at all. Now they feel significant, because they can finally see how every avoided conversation created a little more distance between the two of you. The truth is that this was never simply about a lack of care. Fear played a much larger role. Fear of vulnerability, fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of being misunderstood, fear of losing control over how they were perceived. Because of those fears, silence became their strategy. Avoidance became their comfort zone. Yet time has a way of collecting everything that is left unresolved. What is ignored never truly disappears. It waits, and eventually it returns. Now those unspoken moments are returning all at once. They replay them repeatedly because they can finally see the impact they had. They remember that you did not leave suddenly. You did not walk away because of one single event. You adapted gradually. You responded to what was being given. You stopped filling emotional gaps that should not have been yours to fill. You stopped overextending yourself. You stopped carrying the weight of the connection alone. Without announcing it, without demanding attention, you began protecting your own peace. That shift was quiet, But it was powerful, and it is impossible for them to ignore now. They can feel that you no longer lean toward them in the same way. You no longer fight for understanding with the same intensity. You no longer search endlessly for explanations. There is something different about you now. A calmness, a steadiness, a sense of grounding. Ironically, that calmness unsettles them more than emotional reactions ever could. Because calmness is not confusion. Calmness is clarity, and clarity often means a decision has already taken place internally. They are beginning to understand that uncertainty can no longer keep this connection open. You are no longer standing in confusion. You are standing in self-respect. And that changes everything. Part of what keeps them from reaching out is the awareness that they are not yet fully prepared to show up differently. They may want to explain themselves, they may want to express what they feel, they may want to tell you that they cared all along, but deep down they know something important. Words alone cannot repair what actions damaged. That realization leaves them feeling trapped. One side of them wants to remain hidden because hiding feels safe. The other side wants to grow. Yet growth demands discomfort. Growth demands accountability. Growth demands honesty. At the moment, they are sitting inside that discomfort without knowing exactly how to move through it. Another painful realization is beginning to surface. You were not simply someone they cared about. You also represented a version of themselves they could have become. You reflected emotional growth they were not ready to step into. Instead of embracing that growth, they turned away from it. Now they look back and realize they may have lost more than a relationship. They may have lost an opportunity for personal transformation. That understanding carries its own kind of grief. Because growth that is delayed never truly disappears. It simply becomes heavier when it finally arrives. And they are carrying that weight now. At the same time, they are noticing something remarkable about you. You did not collapse under the situation the way they expected. You did not remain trapped in old patterns. You adapted. You healed. You chose yourself in quiet ways that may not have been visible at first, but are impossible to miss now. That is why thinking about you feels different to them today. The version of you they once knew no longer tells the whole story. They recognize that you are not available to confusion in the same way. You are not responding to inconsistency the way you once did. You have become more grounded, more self-aware, more connected to your own worth, and that is something they never fully anticipated. They are also beginning to understand that if they ever return, they cannot return as the same person who left emotionally. Half-hearted effort no longer fits into the life you are creating. Inconsistency no longer matches the standards you have developed. They feel that difference clearly, and it creates conflict inside them. They do not want to come back unchanged, yet they still do not know exactly how to become the person they need to be. So they remain suspended between awareness and action. And that space feels deeply uncomfortable. What they see now is not simply someone they once had. They see someone who continued growing after being disappointed. Someone who evolved beyond the version of the connection they abandoned. That realization fills them with two emotions at the same time: respect for who you have become, and regret for what they almost allowed themselves to lose. They are finally realizing something that should have been clear long ago. You were never asking for too much. What you wanted was simple: honesty, consistency, emotional presence, and genuine effort. Those were not impossible expectations. They were the foundation of a healthy relationship. The problem was that they could not fully offer those things at the time. Instead of stepping closer, they stepped away. They chose distance over vulnerability and avoidance over engagement. What they failed to understand is that every choice has consequences. Not always immediate ones, but emotional consequences that slowly build until they can no longer be ignored. Now they see those consequences clearly. The distance between you was not created overnight. It formed through missed opportunities, avoided conversations, and inconsistent effort. Because of that, you are no longer available in the same way you once were. You are no longer waiting endlessly. You are no longer offering unlimited access to your heart while receiving uncertainty in return. They feel that change. They notice how much calmer and more aware you have become. You think before reacting. You no longer allow emotions alone to guide your decisions. That clarity comes from growth, and growth is difficult to influence. Part of their struggle now comes from facing accountability, not only for what they did, but for what they failed to do. Not only for the words they spoke, but for the conversations they avoided. They are learning that avoidance always leaves a mark. At the same time, something important has changed within you. You are no longer trying to rescue someone from their own emotional struggles. You are no longer carrying responsibilities that belong to another person. Protecting your peace has become more important than living in uncertainty. That is not emotional coldness. It is emotional wisdom. They are beginning to understand that connection requires responsibility. Trust requires consistency. Emotional closeness requires effort. Those things were missing before, and now they are feeling the absence of them. Another truth is becoming impossible for them to ignore. The version of you who tolerated mixed signals, repeated disappointment, and endless uncertainty is no longer the same person. Life changed you. Experience changed you. Growth changed you. They are beginning to understand that what they once took for granted may no longer exist in the form they remember. In many ways, they are grieving more than the relationship itself. They are grieving the version of you who stayed longer, gave more chances, and kept trying when the effort was not returned. That version of you is part of your story, but it is not who you are today. Now they sit with awareness, and awareness without action creates pressure. The more clearly they see things, the heavier those realizations become. They are learning a lesson many people learn too late. Love does not survive on feelings alone. Intentions are not enough. Caring is not enough. Love requires consistency, participation, and responsibility. Without those things, distance slowly replaces connection. You did not disappear. You evolved. You learned from experience. You established boundaries. You stopped sacrificing your emotional well-being for someone else's uncertainty. That is why your energy feels different now. For the first time, they are seeing clearly what was hidden from them before. Yet recognition is not the same as transformation. They understand more than they used to. They reflect more than they used to. But awareness alone does not automatically create change. Meanwhile, you are no longer living inside that uncertainty. You are building a life that does not depend on someone else becoming ready. That is why the old dynamic cannot truly return. Once someone leaves confusion behind and begins living with clarity, everything changes. As they continue reflecting, another difficult truth emerges. You were never temporary. You were never as replaceable as they convinced themselves you were. You mattered. Your presence mattered. The connection mattered. But meaning alone cannot rebuild what consistency failed to maintain. While they sit with regret, reflection, and awareness, you are moving forward with growth, direction, and a stronger sense of self. You are no longer standing in the waiting chapter of your life. You have entered the building chapter. A meaningful connection cannot survive on hope alone. It needs care, effort, and participation from both people. When those things are neglected long enough, the relationship begins to weaken. The distance between you was not caused by one event. It was created gradually through hesitation, silence, and inconsistency. As they observe you now, they are beginning to understand something powerful. Real strength was never asking someone to wait forever for change. Real strength was having the courage to walk away when your emotional space was no longer being respected. You are no longer the person desperately trying to keep everything alive on your own. You are the person who chose self-respect, peace, and emotional maturity. That transformation happened quietly through boundaries, perspective shifts, and small decisions that slowly changed your life. Now they are left wondering what might have happened if they had been more honest, more available, more courageous, and more emotionally present. The silence between you has become a mirror. It reflects every opportunity they left unused and every assumption that things would remain the same without effort. For a long time, they believed they could return whenever they wanted. Now they understand something fundamental has changed. You transformed your emotional landscape. You are no longer emotionally dependent on their presence because you have found peace, and peace carries a quiet power. Your stability no longer depends on them. Their role in your story has changed. They are becoming part of your history rather than the foundation of your future. The hardest realization of all is that circumstances were never the real problem. Not timing, not distance, not outside influences. The deeper issue was that they were not emotionally present when it mattered most. And now they are finally seeing that truth with a clarity they never had before. The painful part is that they are only fully understanding it after everything has already changed.